This episode of The Chat takes a little setup. It takes place in Nashville, Tennessee, where Sony Cameras gathered a group of photographers, journalists, press, and bloggers to spend a few days experiencing their new line of mirrorless cameras and video gear. It was exciting, eye-opening. I wrote a guest blog about my first impressions for Stuck in Customs, but wanted to sit down with a couple of resident experts to have a chat about this new gear. Joining me were friends Gordon Laing of CameraLabs.com, camera tester and reviewer extraordinaire, and the dashing and debonair host of This Week in Photography, Frederick Van Johnson. We were silly, sleep-deprived, with time for one take and one take only. No rehearsal, flying by the seat of our pants, the sound of an escalating storm outside taunting us in the background of our huge echoey room, and yet we persevered. This is what happened.
Hey everybody, it is The Chat with Karen Hutton, and I am Karen Hutton. This is sound bite-sized insights from some of the coolest people on the planet, and that's why I'm sitting here with my wingmen. I have Frederick Van Johnson on the right, your left. Yes. I have Gordon Laing on my left, your right. And you know what I decided? So we're here in Nashville, Tennessee at a Sony event introducing the new Sony Cameras. So this is a very special edition of The Chat because we're not talking about our lives so much. We're talking about gear, but we're talking about our impressions of it. And I decided that if this were a musical, it would be a sonata, because it would be the Sony Sonata. Oh. And that would give you the name of G major, and that would mean you are F sharp. Because you are
F sharp. I thought you were going to say F minor. I like that. Thank
See?
you.
No. This show is all about elevating us to the next level. And that's why we're going to talk about the brand new earth-shaking gear that Sony is introducing. And we have some samples for y'all here. And we have lots of stuff to say. We don't know what that is yet, but it's going to come because these guys talk gear like you wouldn't believe. So we had what, 3 days?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it was like 12.
12 hours. Yeah. It's like 12 days packed in 3 days.
Yeah, compressed.
Yeah. Like this. And so we have some impressions of, I'd like to do an impression. Kidding. Of this gear. I'm trying to loosen up my audience here. We're listening, Karen!
And we're getting tighter as you progress.
Is she really doing that on camera? Yes, she is. So, guys, what's your first impression? I personally really love the way it feels in my hand. I mean, I love the size.
We're talking about cameras now.
Here we go.
Yeah,
it's going to be that kind of show.
It's going to be downhill. At some point, we're all just going to throw our arms up in the air and go, whee! Okay. So, Gordon, since you opened up your mouth,
yes.
What do you think? What do you think here about this?
Well, I've been testing mirrorless cameras for so long that you kind of get used to their size and the shape and the weight. But one of the things I really wanted to do this week was to compare the size and weight and the quality and the speed and things like that with some conventional full-frame DSLR. So I've got here a Nikon D800E.
Which I got to use. We put this lens on my A7r, I think, last night.
Not this one, an even bigger one.
An even bigger one.
This is a 35mm f1.4. So it's not quite a fair comparison because this is a 35mm f2.8, so it's 2 stops slower.
Yeah.
But the shocking thing is when you look at the size of the body, so ignore the lenses, right? Because a 35 f1.4 lens is going to look roughly the same on both. But look at the size of these bodies. I mean, this is tiny.
Let's hold them up. I'll hold this.
And the fact is, you can hold that up. Whereas if I give you this, that you are actually struggling.
I would have to do P90X before I lifted that. Well, that's why I do P90X. Strangely. So
both of these are full-frame cameras. They both have 36 megapixels. They both don't have anti-aliasing filters because this is the D800D and this is the A7r.
Why do you need an anti-aliasing filter?
Well, exactly. Why don't you need it? Well, they put them in to blur the picture slightly to avoid moire. But by avoiding moire, the side effect...
And moire is what happens when you film patterns.
Yeah, you get that kind of shimmering colour.
Yeah.
So you get that with digital camera sensors. So they blur the image deliberately, believe it or not. You know, we're all chasing the ultimate sharpness, and yet almost all digital cameras deliberately blur the image. But then they realise that at a certain point, the resolution's got so high they're resolving those fine details. It's very rarely an issue for a lot of situations. So they take off they call it an optical low-pass filter or an anti-aliasing filter, and you get slightly crisper results, and that's what Nikon did with this. They did 2 versions, as you know, and effectively Sony's done 2 versions here. They're different resolutions, but the high resolution one doesn't have the filter. So these two are very similar, should be quite similar in at least the kind of proposition of their sensors.
Weight-wise, that guy is...
It's insane.
It's about twice as heavy, right?
I mean, it has got a really heavy lens on it.
Yeah, when I hold this camera, I feel like I need to do this.
Yeah.
You know, to kind of
use
this kind of, you know, I'm a photographer, I'm waiting, you know.
Yeah.
With this one, I'm not doing that. So, yeah, no, I hear you.
That.
I hear you. That's gigantic. And especially after carrying these around for 3 days.
Yeah.
Even, that's the first time I've held a DSLR this week. Yeah,
it is shocking, isn't it?
It's shocking.
You forget exactly how big and heavy they are.
Yeah, and I was looking at this, I was like, yeah, that's kind of big. Especially when you put the battery accessory on this, it starts getting more DSLR-like, but nothing like that. You know.
Yeah.
Well, we had a couple of these with the battery on the bottom and the God, I don't know what some of those ginormous lenses were with, like the 100 to 400.
Yeah.
By the time you do that, it's huge. But by the time you were done doing that with this, you need a Sherpa.
Yeah. You know, the thing that I found on this trip was I had to keep my brain out of the space of this camera should be the magical, fits all needs, perfect camera. It's the full frame unicorn that everybody's been waiting for in mirrorless. And it's not. I mean, it's a first step in that direction, and I think it's a necessary first step, but it's not everyone's camera.
It's not a magic bullet.
It's not a magic bullet. And the A7 and the A7R, between them, they look, we were talking in preface the other day, they look identical, you know, they feel identical, but they're two different cameras for two different audiences, which I hope you dive into in the review that you're putting together.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I really noticed when you're using these cameras, because they look small and approachable, very much like myself, you generally
without the approachable.
Yeah, okay, right, just a small thing. You're F sharp today, aren't you?
Yes.
I'm waking up. Yeah,
this is how it's going to go.
Yeah, that's how it's been. Anyway.
I think in some respects, though, the small size and weight acts against them, because you pick this up and you think, hey, it looks a bit like a casual camera. I'm going to use it like a casual camera. You may use it one-handed. You may not, you know, be very careful with your focusing or with your posture. But you have to remember that, especially on the A7R, this is a 36 megapixel full frame camera in the same respect as the D800 and D800E. And as I found when I tested these cameras, if you use them casually, you might as well be using a 20 megapixel camera. If you want to get the full resolution and quality out of this, you've got to hold it super steady, you've got to consider using a tripod a lot, you've got to compose and focus, especially very, very carefully. Yeah. And I think one of the problems with these is that you're tempted to kind of shoot and run and shoot, you know, you're tempted to be a bit faster and a bit more slapdash. And if you want to see the maximum quality, especially out of the A7R, you've got to treat it right.
Well, and that's one of the things that I'm finding between the two is the 7R. You know, if I do the one-handed, like you said, slapdash, I'm going to start using that.
Yeah,
I had a lot more slapdash.
There you go.
A lot of the images were not so well in focus, and I don't know if that's partly the camera or largely me.
I found that too. I don't know. Yeah. I found that, you know, that they would look, you know, you're running around running and gunning.
Doing exactly the same thing.
Slapdash, running and gunning, you know. You'd be doing the exact same thing I do with my other cameras.
Yeah, and the same thing with each other.
And some of the frames would be soft, you know, in the same situation. We were shooting a country music star.
Yeah.
And I'm taking pictures, some of them that looked perfect in frame. When I looked at them in Lightroom, not perfect.
It's like you've got the front of the shirt, not the eye.
Yes.
In focus, and you're like, man, I thought I had the perfect shot.
Right,
there.
the depth of field thing.
Yeah.
The other thing, sorry about that, the other thing that got me on this one, speaking of focus, was the lack of a touchscreen on this. There's no touchscreen, and I'm used to, you know, I'm spoiled with, you know, smartphones, and I'm like, okay, I want to okay.
We're both doing this. We've been the guys all week going, why isn't it working?
I know, I'm looking over at you guys and you're like poking your camera. I'm like, why are you poking your camera?
But it's a big problem because a lot of people who haven't used touch screens, they go, well, what do you want to touch your way through the menu for? And that's not what they're for. You can do that. But what they're for is, as Frederick says, you compose your shot, and then when the composition's perfect, then you tap at the thing you want it to focus at, and it focuses on it. Whereas instead what you end up doing with this is you have to manually move the AF area, and then when you realise that it's not in the right place and suddenly the moment, you know, you're losing the moment, you recompose so that the thing you want in focus is now behind or, you know, in front of the point, and you've lost the right composition.
Yeah.
One of the things I like about Sony is this thing that comes out, the articulating screen here. You can flip it that way, you can pull it out like this, you can, you know, hold the thing up and still see the thing that you're shooting at, so on and so forth. I really do like that. But you know what I thought was interesting? Because the A7 is a lot quicker to focus better for portraits, better for sports, you know, better for certain kinds of things, you know, a little bit more of a run and gun camera.
Yeah.
And I thought it was, you know, pretty fast. But then I heard somebody on the bus say, boy, it's a lot slower than I expected. And I'm like, wow, a lot of this comes down to people's expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and what
And
you're
what their
used
needs
to.
are.
And what your needs
expectations,
are.
needs, budgets. Yeah, it's all
And that's
subjective.
what I was going to say, is a lot of people are saying to me, what's the best camera? And I'm like, well, more than ever with this set of cameras, and we're not even talking about the RX10, but more than ever, it's about, well, now you got to figure out what you want to do and then shop the camera to that. Whereas it used to be, what's the best? I'll go to that and I'll learn that. Now it's really the other way around. And so I thought that was really interesting. And speaking of the RX10, which I just did, we don't have that one here, but that one is a fixed lens, 70 to 200,
28.
28.
Sorry,
like
24.
that.
Oh, was it 24?
It's magic.
Why did I think
lens.
70? Oh, I think I wrote 70 somewhere. I'll have to correct that. So 24 to 200.
Don't worry, the audience will correct you.
Yeah, exactly. Constantly.
That's what comments are for.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, smack you later. Anyway, so I love, and it's 2.8, f2.8 throughout the entire run of the lens, which I think is really cool. And the video, we didn't do much with the video.
I've been doing a lot with the video.
What do you think of the video?
I think it's really good. I think it's made more of a video camera than a still camera because it's got so many fantastic video features. I mean, first of all, it looks like a kind of chunky super zoom camera, but it's weatherproof body, which you don't normally get. It's got a headphone socket, microphone socket. You've got the zebra patterns and the focus peaking. You've got built-in ND filters. These are all really important for videos, you know. And even though the thing when I was first found out about it and I was reading about the specifications, I was like, oh man, you know, again, no touch screen, no face detect AF on the sensor, and I thought it's not going to be great at continuous autofocusing. But I did a lot of tests with those today and it wasn't bad. It was focusing quite confidently without the usual hunting. It wasn't hesitant. It was smooth. I think it could be really good.
So feature price point wise, that camera versus say the GH3 from Panasonic, which has been kind of a de facto, just for the non-DSLR shooter crowd. What do you think?
Well, it's got a 1-inch type sensor, which is the same as the RX10 too. So if you're familiar with that camera, the quality is going to be essentially the same, at least in terms of noise and different sensitivities. That sensor is smaller than Micro Four Thirds. That's an important thing to point out here. It's bigger than the point and shoot, it's smaller than Micro Four Thirds. So the GH3 as a Micro Four Thirds camera is going to have a slightly bigger sensor. It's going to have the benefit of interchangeable lenses. I don't know off the top of my head the bit rates on the RX10, but I do know on the GH3 that they can be very, very high. More importantly, for you and I, Frederick,
they're leaving the end.
Yeah, Karen was talking about.
Sorry.
Our gracious host was talking about the articulated screen on the back, but it's only tilting vertically,
right?
As indeed most Sony cameras do. What it doesn't do is flip out to the side. Now this is a big deal for two reasons. First, if you're shooting in the horizontal, the landscape shape, this is fine because you can shoot low like that or high like that. But if you shoot in the portrait shape, as I do a lot, then this tilting out to the side is not going to help you unless you're hiding behind a tree.
You're trying to get around a corner.
A tree.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
So
you're doing a lot of voices this week.
So you need it to tilt both ways. But more importantly, if you're a one-man operation doing video pieces to camera, it's totally invaluable to be able to flip the screen out so you can see yourself. Or even if you're doing selfies, you're like, do it this way, right? That's what you do like
That's
that.
very nice.
Yeah, do you like that?
Yeah.
So you can't do that, and it just seems that the lack of full articulation and the lack of the touch screen are two major issues that I have with the full frame alphas and the RX10. Yeah. If they had those features, they would be much more usable cameras in my view.
So the bottom line is what he said. So you shoot the OEMD, right?
Yeah, the OEMD EM5 at the moment, which is my.
And I shoot Canon 5D3.
I have an OMD EM5 and a Panasonic GX7.
So would you switch to this?
Wow.
At this point?
At this point, I would not switch to this.
What would it take to make you switch to this?
What he said. So I need that. I want a touchscreen on here for one, because I'm seriously lost. I found that lost, and you can, your brain rewires.
It messes up your.
But even like we were getting ready to record this, we're recording this on the Sony NEX5R, and my brain had to rewire the controls because that camera has a touchscreen. So I'm like, okay, how do I can touch the screen again, you know? So you have to rewire that. So that is a big deal, and the articulating LCD is really important to me. The next camera that I get needs to have that in there, because I do a lot of one-man band stuff like Gordon does. I don't have a crew and a staff like you do. So I don't
have a staff or a crew. And
there are people standing all around us.
Yeah, all around us. So
this
silently.
one's been pulling a face at me the whole time.
Oh, listen, buddy. Okay, you guys. So in my thing, I want to desperately switch to lighter. I can't quite do it yet. I will do it at some point. I need lenses. I need the lenses. I would like the articulated screen. I've never really used touchscreen before, but I'm sure I will fall in love with it. But I need some lenses, and I need for the auto bracketing to be a little bit more like the rest of the world and the way I want it to be. But it's very close. It's a great camera. It's a great start, and it's really an exciting innovation, I think.
It is.
And it's really exciting to be a part of this launch. So thank you, Sony, and we'll have more. These guys, watch for these guys, Frederick Van Johnson, Gordon Laing. They'll be doing reviews. I will be having some out there as well. I've got one out on Stuck in Customs, and which is just the first impressions. We will be back with more. And we'll be back with more next week with another fabulous guest. Not my two wingmen, but it'll be someone wonderful.
Karen.
And I thank you for joining me
I thought
today.
it was you.
Oh, God. We're going to end this before it goes down in flames. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Ta-ta.
Toodaloo. Toodaloo.
Toodaloo.
Toodaloo.
See you, fellas.
See you, fellas.
Awesome.